Good morning. Hello, welcome everyone to Lifescape's premiere Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives cooking class. My name is Dana Bosselman and I am the integrative and functional dietitian at Lifescape. And it's such a pleasure to be able to do this class on a monthly basis. And since we've been able to continue it virtually, I welcome you all. And please feel free to share this class at the end if you like it with any of your friends who would benefit as well. And today we're going to be doing something really simple but actually quite profound. And I guess that's the foundation of the work that I do, is one simple easy thing that you can enact or do or add to your diet or make a quick change, and then have it ripple out into these benefits that keep going and going and going. So what we're going to be doing today is making a really delicious, it could be an appetizer or addition to a meal, or a gift, a holiday gift would be a nice idea too. And the recipe today is apple pie spiced walnuts with raisins. And the hardest part of making this recipe is gathering the ingredients. The rest of it's so simple and easy to do. And so I wanted to put this together first, and then while it's baking in our virtual oven, I want to expand a little bit on some of the benefits of the star ingredient, which is the walnut. And it really truly is a popular nut because there is an annual conference held at University of California, Davis, that gathers all kinds of health professionals and scientists, and they gather to discuss the newest research and benefits around walnuts. So we're going to partake of that in just a little bit. And just to share with you, when I was at a conference recently, I received this really cute little tin, and it's walnuts, the hardest working nut. So we're going to see how hard it can work for us today and continue working on and on. And so what we're going to do is start out with the ingredients. Like I said, have them gathered in advance so you don't miss out on anything. And one thing I do want to point out with this recipe is the way it's presented, that you were able to download and view, is for a very small serving size. And I really recommend that you go big on this one and make it so that there's an ample amount for you to enjoy and share and use throughout the week. So when you're making it, you want to taste as you go, because I find that I always like to add a little more oil, a little more maple syrup, and definitely a lot more cinnamon. So do it to your taste. You know, everyone knows me, I think, for now. And what I like to tell you is that recipes are a template. They're just a suggestion. They're an encouragement and an idea. And you can adjust it to your own personal taste or how you want it to come out. So with that being said, we're going to start off, and I'm not using olive oil as it states in the recipe. You sure can. That's completely fine. If you're baking with olive oil, I do recommend that you do the refined olive oil versus the unrefined. The refined version can hold up to a little higher heat, and that's important because you don't want your oils to get too hot, because they'll start smoking, and once they're smoking, they're rancid and they're bad, and they contribute to a whole host of inflammatory states. So refined olive oil, or you can do what I did, and I switched to some coconut oil. And I like the coconut oil especially because it's antifungal, antimicrobial, and antiviral. So why not, include this? And this does make sense. Some people don't like that coconut taste in all their food. Again, the refined coconut oil doesn't have that flavor. This is the unrefined. It can still go to a pretty high temperature. And today we're baking the walnuts at 350 degrees. So it's, it's not too bad. So with that being said, I'm just going to scoop out some oil and place it in my bowl down here. I'll show it to you as we go along, as I always do. And I've got 2 tablespoons in here right now. If you're using coconut oil and it's not already liquid, then you're going to want to get it to a liquid state by just warming it up ever so slightly. Mine is liquid because it's still, even though it's November, it's Arizona, and it's still really warm outside. So this isn't a problem. So I've got the oil in here, and then I'm going to add the spices. And this is a hack for you, if you will, that you want to add spices to oil even if you're cooking on the stove, add the spices before you add the rest of the food. And the reason why is because they're dry. And in order for them to become fragrant, flavorful, and release all of their nutritional benefits, they need to be hydrated. So that's a tip for this recipe and anything else. So I'm just adding some cinnamon right now. And again, you can measure it or not, just depends. With these kinds of spices, it's not as critical that you do the measuring and you just go to taste. Now I'm adding some pink salt, and this is the Himalayan salt. I like it because it's mineral salt, so it's got the magnesium, sodium, chloride, potassium. Those are the nutrients that we are missing in our filtered water, so it's nice to add that in when you can. And then I'm sprinkling in some nutmeg. So this is where the apple pie sensation comes in, where you start getting that reminiscent feeling of yum. And then the last piece of that is the allspice. So I'm going to sprinkle that in, not as much because it's very strong. Nutmeg and allspice, a little does go a long way. Cinnamon, a little bit can go longer, so you can play with those spice blends. And so now I've got that here, and I'm just mixing it up in the bowl so that it's getting a chance to infuse and become well blended. This is also a technique you want to do for dressing when you make homemade dressing, is mix it in a bowl or a shaker container first so that all the spices and seasonings can blend together. And then when you pour it on the salad, it's a nice even mixture. So with that being said, I'm next going to add the maple syrup. And this is a big jar of organic maple syrup. I purchased this one at Costco, and you can get it at any kind of grocery store, but I always do like to get the organic. This one is grade A. Ideally grade B is what we're looking for. It has a little bit more nutrient-rich profile, but it's hard to find. And for some reason, we're conditioned to think that A means top and B means bottom. It's not actually true in this case, but it's a small point. So from here, I'm going to put in a couple tablespoons of the apple cider vinegar. And I'm doing more of a quantity because, like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to make a bigger batch than the recipe calls for. So now that all of those spices are together, we'll let them blend for a minute, and you pull out your walnuts. And again, I purchased these at Costco. I happen to be in the Costco shopping vicinity recently, and this is a big bag of organic walnuts, and you just sprinkle in a couple of cups, and you can hear me making noise down here. And once that's in there, then just stir together the mixture that you made of the spices and the oil. And this is where you're going to start doing your taste testing. So you can taste test with your nose, with your eyes, and with your taste buds themselves. And make sure that you have enough of that mixture to really coat the nuts so that they're all dressed properly. And some of you may be thinking, well, normally I ask you to eat your nuts raw, organic and raw, unsalted. And yes, that is true for, in general, you want to go that way. But this is a special treat. This is something that we're making that's really, it is like in replace of apple pie. And so we're making it possible to have some kind of dessert, if you will, where you still stay within a healthy boundary, but you get to experience some of the different tastes and sensations. And when I talk about that, that's a perfect segue into this concept of fast cooking, FASS. That's fat, acid, salt, and sweet. And I learned that concept from a brilliant chef and culinary translator. Her name is Rebecca Katz. If you want to dip into her creative and fantastic tasting recipes, look her up online. That's Katz. And she has a recipe box on her site that I use frequently. It's really fantastic food. And so what that means, that fast cooking, is it's fat, which in our case we've got the coconut oil or olive oil if you're using that. Acid we don't really have in this recipe, which is okay. I don't think it would work as well. And then Salt, obviously, we have, and sweet, we're getting it in 2 places from the maple syrup and the raisins. And if you want to omit the raisins because you are adding the maple syrup, that's fine. You really need the maple syrup in this recipe. You don't have to have the raisins. So you can kind of give and take in that arena, whatever feels good to you. But what happens when we do all of those, when we add all those different ingredients, that hits every single taste bud in your mouth. And when your taste buds light up, that's when you light up. And that's when we go, yum, this is so good. And it's a symphony of flavors. So don't feel guilty about using a little bit of maple syrup or some raw local honey as needed, and allow it to really enhance your dish and your meal. So that's another tip for you that you can translate. So then once these are all done, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, you know, this probably could use a smidge more cinnamon just based on my experience. So I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit more of that on there. If you want them to be a little sweeter, you could maybe decide if it needs a little more maple syrup. And this is where I would encourage you to just take one and have a quick taste. So then what you would do is take a silver or baking tray and line it with parchment paper. Ideally it is parchment paper and not foil. We're trying to eliminate any potential toxin release with the foil. It's not proven, as far as I know, to actually occur, but parchment paper is certainly the safest way to go. And then you'll want to spread your walnuts out in a nice, even, flat space so that they're not overlapping on each other. And have your oven preheated to 350. So we're going to go into our virtual oven space and say that we've already put these all together and stick them over there for now. I'm going to pull them out done in a little bit, and we'll add our raisins and have some taste testing. But in the meantime, I wanted to captivate you and talk a little bit about why that walnut is such a hard-working nut. And this is interesting to consider how food really is medicine, and it's medicine because of the naturally occurring compounds in it that we can't get anywhere else but in nature. And so I want to talk about the first benefit of the walnut, which is the omega-3 fats. And a lot of people are talking about omega-3s right now because they are anti-inflammatory, and we're all trying to cool down the inflammation response as much as possible. And it's really about balancing your omega-3s and your omega-6s. And that could be a whole nother topic, but for now, just know that the omega-3 fats in walnuts come from a vegetarian source, a plant source, and that's alpha-linoleic acid, or ALA. And for those of you who are solely vegetarian, just know that form isn't as well converted, and you may need to consume more of it in order to get the omega-3s that you need. Otherwise, you can balance your plant sources, like in the walnuts, with animal sources. Primarily, that's your fatty fish. So that's going to be salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, that sort of thing. So if you do a combination of those foods, and then some people will end up also taking a fish oil, which is another way to do the omega-3s. Also, the nutrient profile of the walnut is antioxidant rich on its own, and that's because it has a high amount of vitamin E, because that's the walnut oil itself, naturally occurring, contains vitamin E, and it has polyphenols in it. That's a really important point. Polyphenols are compounds that are only made by plants. And this is interesting. There's a subgroup of polyphenols in walnuts that is converted by gut bacteria to an anti-inflammatory compound. And here's a nice tie-in where we're always thinking about the health of our guts and how does that affect the rest of our body. Everything is connected. We're not just a head up here and a body down here. It's all one human, one being, one living organism. And so what happens in the gut goes to the brain, and what happens in the brain goes to the gut. It's a two-way highway through the vagus nerve. And so when I'm thinking about gut health here, I'm thinking about the beneficial bacteria that are fed by the fibers in the gut, in the walnuts, and those fibers help the bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids. Those are forms of fats that help nourish the gut itself and the rest of the body. So you're getting this 1-2 benefit, an antioxidant, a polyphenol, and then additional subclasses of polyphenol. So lots of stuff is working behind the scenes to keep us healthy and tamp down inflammation. And this is also true when we think of oxidative stress. And oxidative stress happens just even by breathing. And right now, the oxidative stress has been incredibly high due to all the fires and the smoke and the environmental toxins in the air that we've been taking in. So in order to counter the oxidative stress, we want to bring in antioxidants. And one of the ways we think of this is we want to reduce the oxidative stress caused by LDLs, or low density lipoproteins. And that's another thing that happens with the walnuts. So oftentimes, if you work with me on a cardiovascular anti-inflammatory diet, I'm going to ask you to start including more walnuts in your regime. Not necessarily always fancy like today, but just some raw nuts in of themselves. And that's actually a really nice segue to the next point I wanted to make. And this is where I talk about healthy weight. And walnuts in particular are one of those items that actually can contribute to a healthy weight more so than we would think. A lot of times we've been conditioned to think that nuts are calorie dense and that's going to cause us to gain weight. Well, that's actually not true. Calories are information, and it depends on what that information tells your body to do. And the information from the calories from walnuts tells your body that you're full, that you're satisfied, that you don't need to go back into the kitchen a half hour later and scrounge for some crackers or some refined carbohydrate foods, a piece of bread or a piece of toast. And instead, it allows you to focus on other things and move on through your day. And interestingly, I wanted to point out that there was a study published in the Journal of Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism. And what they looked at was a cohort of obese individuals, and they asked them to add 2 ounces of raw walnuts a day to a smoothie. And that was done, and that was done for 5 days. And then after that 5-day period, they ran the study participants through an MRI scan of the brain. And this is where it was interesting. They found that the walnuts definitely correlated to an increase in activity in the part of the brain that tampered down cravings for other foods like cake and French fries and things like that, and created a higher sense of satiety and satisfaction. So it was helping them manage hunger signaling, which is a big part of keeping the body in balance, is those hormones that signal hunger and fullness. And they also noticed that there were positive effects on blood sugar. So blood sugar didn't go up and come down like a rock, like a roller coaster. Instead, it stayed more steady state. And that's important because it means you're not using as much insulin from the pancreas, and regulating blood sugar is an important part of overall health, absolutely. Another thing I wanted to point out too is that walnuts are significantly correlated with overall brain health in and of themselves. Part of that is because it reduces the inflammatory load in the body, but also, like I said, these two are connected, and so it reduces the inflammation in the brain. Now, one of the other ways we can do that is by sleeping. And some of you know me quite well in that regard, and I ask you to really work on your sleep and think about what's going on there. But these vitamin E, the polyphenols, the naturally occurring antioxidants all help dampen that flame of inflammation and keep your brain humming along so you can process things faster, have better mental agility, improve memory. So I would say this is really anti-aging if you want to think about it that way, because what makes a person feel old is saying, I can't remember where my keys are, and saying it multiple times a day. So lots of benefits there. And then I wanted to, I hear the timer. Let's pull out the walnuts. Ta-da! So these are already baked at 350 degrees for about 16 minutes. They're baked for 8 minutes, and then I went in with a spatula and mixed it all up and then kept them going for another 8. Turned off the oven and let them sit for a few more minutes in the warm oven and then pulled them out. And then what you want to do is just take some raisins. This is a big bag of organic raisins, and I just sprinkle that into the mixture, and again, mix it up once the walnuts are cooked and warm. If you add the dried fruit when the walnuts are roasting, you're going to really dry out the fruit and it could get like a rock, and that's where it's not enjoyable because it feels like it's pulling out a tooth. And so add the raisins in last and mix it all together so that the yummy juices and sauce all get combined nicely. And then you have your nice, amazing, or aromatic bowl of anti-inflammatory deliciousness. And if we had smell vision right now, I would turn it on and waft this out to you, because even though these have been baked and cooled, they still just smell absolutely divine. And I guarantee you, if you sprinkled this on a bowl of plain Greek organic yogurt, full fat, you would feel like you were actually getting like an apple pie, with the ice cream. So please consider making that, and think about other ways that you can add walnuts into your diet. If not in this sort of holiday treat sort of way, you can add them to salads. You can chop them up and sprinkle them on top of dips like hummus. They're also really nice to make. If you grind them up in a food processor or a blender, it makes them like a fine dust, if you will, and you can use that as a coating instead of bread. You can use that to coat fish, like if you ever heard of like pecan crusted salmon or trout. This would be the walnut crusted version. It can go on chicken or fish, or even on a plant protein like tempeh or tofu. You can obviously add the walnuts to cooked whole grains like steel cut oats or quinoa, amaranth. You can add some chopped walnuts into a wrap for a crunchy treat. Trail mix, stir fries, or you can even get walnut oil, which you would not use for cooking because it can't take the heat, but you can add it into a dressing and use it that way. So lots of uses for the walnut. Now you can see why at the beginning of the podcast we called it the hardest working nut, because it can go into so many different arenas and shine, not just from a taste perspective, but from a nutritional perspective. So with that being said, I thank you so much for listening. Today was a lot more of an educational nutrition cooking class, but it all comes back together, and do consider making this in a big batch and sharing it with your family and friends and those that you want to experience something new and then lively. I'm going to be sharing this with the staff here after this is over, and looking forward to any comments or feedbacks that you may have. Remember that everything is fluid and flexible. You can adapt to the recipe as you want, and let me know how that goes. Until then, I wish all of you a safe and happy upcoming weekend and holiday season, and I'll be back with you again beginning of December for one more virtual session. Until then, be well.